What's up, guys? I'm Alex Bromley, owner of Empire Barbell in Redlands, California. This is my man Tony Russell, owner of testimonytraining.com. Today we're going to unfuck your overhead press. Now I'm going to start today's discussion with a push press because the push press is the cornerstone of all overhead pressing activities. If done correctly, it'll carry over to your strict press, your bench press, your split jerk, your push jerk, and all other aspects of upper body strength. Training the push press will increase speed and coordination through your lower body. When initiating the press, it will teach power and rate of force development through your upper body, and it will actually get your lockout stronger as well. It's also a really effective tool for hypertrophy work. I know I've put a lot of size on my upper body just by doing high loads, high volume, high reps with the push press as well. So that's going to be our primary focus today. All right, so we're going to start with the rack position, where you get your hands, how you position your elbows, how far back that bar is into your throat. That's all going to determine how successful you are when you go to launch into the bar. Now, we're going to do two examples. Tony is more similar to myself in the fact that he has a very developed upper body, developed shoulders, and shoulders are really hard to stretch. They're hard to keep limber. So over time, you tend to see bigger pressers, bigger shoulders, and they get more bound in their press position. So even when a couple 100 pounds is on the bar, Tony's still going to have that bar floating up by his chin. So to contrast that, we're going to have David over here show a second option for guys that don't necessarily have as developed an upper body or aren't quite as bound throughout their shoulders. So to start out with Tony, we're going to want to start with a closer position. I usually recommend people grab right outside of the ring. Now there's a spectrum of distance between being right next to the inside ring, right next to the smooth, versus right next to the outside ring. We're going to start narrow. Now the narrow position creates compression. So your elbows should be kept tight by your bicep running into your forearm, and your shoulders should get added compression from your lats running into your upper arm. This tension is going to create a good springboard for when you go to drive. So let's go ahead and take your grip, take a step back. Now, like I said, see how high that bar is floating? See if you can bring that down just a little bit. Yeah, it's tight right there. Now what you're going to notice is he's arching back a little bit. See if you can get those ribs down. Ideally, you're going to be nice and upright. You want to eliminate any excessive arching. It's usually a sign of tight lats. So that's good. So bring that bar back and under your chin a little bit. It's just got to be under the chin, and elbows up slightly. There you go. Does that feel tight?
Very.
Very tight. That bar is ready to leap off of his sternum right now. Now it's important to note that push pressing is not a split jerk. We're not trying to be an Olympic lifter. The position somebody gets in to do a 500-pound split jerk is a lot different than you're going to be in when you go to do a push press, especially in a contest where you're push pressing a log, a keg, where you're doing it for reps, where you have to clean it each time. The fact is, we want to get the best of both worlds. We want to get the best of leg drive along with the positioning that allows us to punch through quickly. And that's not necessarily going to be kept with super high elbows. Not that we could get our elbows that high to begin with. So go ahead and rack the bar. Okay, David, go ahead and come in. Now with Tony and myself, we get so much tension just from the tightness that we can create a stable position before we jump into the bar. Now if there's distance between your collarbone and the bar, that's not as efficient. Even if you're incredibly tight, you're going to notice on a heavy push press that as you go up, that bar is going to come down even for just a split second. Now that's going to leak strength. We do not want that force production we're putting up in the bar to leak as our shoulders get spongy and that bar trampolines up and down. Ideally, you want 1-to-1, which means you go up, that bar goes up. Now, guys that don't have quite as developed an upper body, or basically guys that are more mobile, guys that are more flexible through their upper body, typically guys that are either smaller frame or have a really deep background in Olympic lifting, they can make up for lack of pressing power by getting a much more efficient rack position. So go ahead and get your grip in the same spot, just right outside the smooth. Good. Okay, go ahead and walk it out for me. There you go. So we have the same position. We still have the biceps running into the forearms. Lats should be tight up against the upper arm. And notice how the bar is making contact with his collarbone. Because of that, he's able to get his elbows a bit higher, which is going to push that bar back. That is much better leverage. The closer your bar is to the center of mass, the more power you're going to get as you jump. Also, as he jumps, don't jump, but just give a little dip and then come back up, like a quarter front squat. And then come back up. So right there, the bar stays glued, which means when he comes up, that bar comes up. Go ahead and rack it. That's perfect. Thank you, sir. Tony, go ahead and jump back in. So, bound guys, we're hindered because we can't get quite an efficient rack position, which means our jump isn't going to be necessarily as efficient, but we make up for it with added strength and stability. So the follow through on the press tends to be better. Now, starting wide gives more compression at the bottom, which means we're going to be able to jump into that bar more efficiently. But that can actually cause its own separate problem. Go ahead and take the bar out to me in that same grip. What I want you to do is press it overhead. There you go. So the lockout position is characterized by body standing in a straight line, elbows locked. The bar should be behind the head. If that bar were to drop, you would want it to slice it in half, from his head down to his shoulders, through his hips and feet. Now, lock your elbows out as hard as you can, right there. Does that feel tight?
Oh, very.
Very, okay. So even though we start with more compression at the bottom, with that close grip, the shoulders tend to crowd at the top. And guys, especially with tighter shoulders, tighter lats, might even have problems getting their head through. You'll see a lot of guys with tight lats ended in an arch position with the bar out in front. So what I want you to do is hold that position and scoot your arms out about 2 inches. Okay, does that feel less tight?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, take it out another ½ inch, just another foot right there. That feels pretty easy to hold overhead, right? So what we've done is by moving the hands out, we've eliminated the crowding around his shoulders, which means he's not going to run into a speed bump when he goes to lock out 300 pounds over his head on a barbell. So when you're finding your hand position, you want to be able to take those two factors, how tight or loose you are at the bottom versus how tight or relaxed you are at the top. You want to be able to get enough compression at the bottom to aid with that initial push, but you don't want to be so compressed that you run into a second speed bump at the top. I myself benefit from a medium grip. My hands are a few inches outside of my shoulders. This allows me to get my elbows up just a little bit higher. You just need the elbow to be a little bit in front of the bar, and it gets the bar about as far below my chin as I can without a few hundred pounds on the bar. So this is the best of both worlds. I get compression at the bottom, but I'm able to glide into an easy lockout. When I'm back in here, I immediately notice how tight that is and how much harder it is for me to lock out. Guys with exceptionally long arms might benefit from a wider grip, not quite a snatch grip, but something wide enough that it allows for a shorter range of motion and an easier glide to lockout. And scene. All right, so now that we got the rack position dialed in, you're in the tightest possible position you can get in, but you can also accommodate a nice fluid lockout. We got to worry about what your feet are doing. The entirety of a push press begins with your legs. You start with a dip, you stop, return direction, and then extend up on your toes, and then eventually you carry that momentum into the lockout. So if your feet aren't in the right position, you're going to fuck up the whole press. So with the feet shoulder width, go ahead and dip very slightly and pause. Right there, freeze. So that's all you need to dip. You don't have to go into a half squat. You just need to dip a few inches. Notice that his body is completely upright. His hips stay directly under his shoulder. Now what he's going to do is reverse direction, extend up on his toes, and then lock the bar out. So go into a jump and then press it out. Good. Okay, go ahead and bring it down. Now give one more, and this time a little quicker, and I want to see your heels come up off the ground. And hold that up like it was a barbell. That's just to simulate position. Okay, so go ahead and bring it back down into the rack position. Down, good, elbows up a little bit. Now this gives us a better sight of what's going on. So notice that where he has the bar, the elbows have to be under, but ideally in front of the bar. If you have a few hundred pounds loaded on this broomstick and the elbows are behind, that's going to put all the tension on the front delts. It's basically going to turn out to look like a front raise. He has the bar, bring it back a little bit and close your hands all the way around it. Now Tony's really tight right now. This is why he's explosive with so much weight, is because how bound he is through his shoulders. That's already given starting power. Now, his body is for all intents and purposes in a straight line. We're going to go off positioning in just a minute. His feet are about shoulder width apart. Now I want you to slowly dip into the bottom position right there. Now this is very important. His heels are on the ground, his butt is directly under his shoulders. If you were to draw a line from the bar down through his shoulders and hips, everything would be nice and perpendicular to the ground. That's exactly what we want. Okay, stand up. Okay, now I want you to execute a dip and drive all at once. Good. Now it was subtle, but his heels popped up off the ground. You can go ahead and bring it down. His heels popped up off the ground, but immediately returned back down. That's very important. When you go to execute the dip and drive, as you extend, you want to come up through your knees and hips, finish on your toes, and let your heels drop back down as you lock out. A common newbie mistake is people don't know how to coordinate the heel drop and they end up locking out on their toes before coming back down, and it throws you off. Go ahead and do it again, and as soon as you jump, let your heels hit hard on the ground again. That's it. You should even hear the thud. While you're executing reps, it should be a steady rhythm of heels back down on the ground as you press, just like that. Okay, go ahead and bring it back down into the rack position. Now, jumping with proper alignment and a ton of force isn't going to do a damn bit of good if your positioning is off to your midsection. Everything you generate through your legs has to travel up through your spine before it's expressed on that barbell. So it is incredibly important that the midsection and the upper back is in proper alignment. Now, the most common problems you see are people shifting forward or backwards as they dip. Now, that's probably one of the most common mistakes people do, is they let their knees come completely forward. Now, if you can see, that forces everything to rock forward on his toes, which means shitty force transfer off the ground, and it moves his hips in front of the bar, which destabilizes his entire torso. That is a really awful position to press. That's where most people fall into. And it's actually the reason that really strong pressers that have never push pressed can usually strict press more than they push press. All right, so now we're gonna take all those pieces of the push press and we're gonna put them together. So you can take all of that positioning, all that strength, all that power, and have it realized into a big number where that bar ends up directly over your head. So the big things, the big three that carry over to a big push press is optimizing your leverages. That's your foot position, your knees, hips, your rack position, making sure you're vertical through the entire press. The timing and coordination of jumping and driving, getting momentum in that bar. And the third thing is gonna be what primarily concerns your upper body. And that's your ability to punch through quickly, explosively, and press the weight out overhead. That's actually the factor that carries over the most to your upper body development. So we're gonna tie it all together. I got a little bit of weight on the bar, so Tony's not trying to maintain position with an empty bar. So I'm gonna have him get in position following every guideline you just set. He's gonna get his hands close enough to get compressed, but wide enough to where he can slide into an easy lockout. He's gonna get the rack position with the bar as far under his chin and close to his collarbone as he can without cheating by maneuvering different parts of his body. He's got his elbows up, that's perfect, feet shoulder width. Now what Tony's gonna do is do a short dip and drive and press as explosively as he can to lock out. Go ahead and hit it. Perfect. Okay, bring it down. One more time. Deep breath, tighten up, and quick. Good. Okay, let's do one more. That's it. Good. Go ahead and bring it down and rack it. So we saw a couple things from this. Hands, elbows up. But what it was a good example of, and partially is because it's lightweight, but on top of that, Tony is pretty explosive. It was how quickly he dipped, hit the change of direction, extended, and followed through with his arms. So there's two big things that go into that. One is the timing, how low he dips, and at what point he changes direction, and how explosively he changes direction. I always recommend a short dip. If you Google any Olympic weightlifter that has a 500-pound jerk, you're gonna see just a few inches of dip and a quick turnaround. In fact, if you blink, you'll probably miss it. Athletes who aren't quite as strong or stable with the weight might get away with a longer dip and drive because it gives them more time to accelerate on the way up. The problem is that going into a longer dip can oftentimes throw you off. It can push your hips too far back, your knees too far forward. It can be hard to maintain a vertical dip if you overextend at the bottom. So since the biggest numbers are always going to be put up with a short, quick, explosive change of direction, I recommend that's what you practice. And this is actually what most people miss. The guys that just try to throw in leg drive, who already have strong upper bodies, they don't have the technical precision of where to dip, how far to go down, how quickly to change direction. Those are all technical pointers that require skill and practice. Okay, so that's point one, dip and drive. How far, how fast. Thing two is your upper body. It's how far, at what point you're pressing through and how explosively. Tony has a very strong upper body, but he's also used to firing his arms through. What you'll typically see with people who are less used to a push press is a stutter, where there'll be a jump, a catch, and then a second lockout. So see if you can reproduce that with the bar. Okay, go ahead and rack it. So if you're struggling with that, it's because that's the wrong way to do it, and that's what we were trying to show. People who do not follow through quickly enough with their arms will find themselves without enough momentum on the bar, so there will be a second catch. Now, if they got the bar high enough to where they're mechanically in a strong position, there will be a second lockout. The way you fix that is by speed work. That doesn't mean you need to rig up a bunch of bands and chains or do a bunch of reps at 50%. That just means all of your warm-ups and all of your working sets need to emphasize a violent intention to punch all the way through. The second you change direction and start coming up, you should be punching through, accelerating, and riding it all the way to lockout. You want to speed up as the bar moves, not slow down. That's also a point that takes a lot of practice, and it's why more precise push pressers tend to do better than strong pressers who just try to throw a little leg movement in.